Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to the Rocket Revenue listeners. This is another episode of Rocket Revenue where we talk about, we open source how we are building a predictable and repeatable revenue model. And, most of the times we talk about themes and things that we are implementing right now, or just broad themes in the industry, and we kind of take them apart. Today, Mr. Troy Barter and myself are going to talk about lessons learned building startups, not just mistakes we've made, which I'm sure we have made plenty, me more than Barter, but also maybe things that we found that worked. If we would have known it a bit sooner, we'd be further than where we are today. So hopefully by sharing those, you guys are in that process and can avoid some of the mistakes. Reason I bring that up, I think that people oftentimes say you learn through failure, but the best learn from other people's failure as well, so you can learn faster instead of just failing every time on your own. If you already know somebody else did it, why not avoid it? So, Barter, I'll just kind of kick it off to you. Why don't you start out with one lesson learned, whether mistake, failure, something you should double down on?
Yeah. So I would say with mine, so sales org, when we started salesorg.io, I think you're supposed to say that part also, or else it's stupid because people don't know how to find it. We were similar to a Course Careers or an Aspireship, and we're a tech sales training or like a boot camp, and then a recruiting company. And the way that those models really work is like, yeah, you'll have your ICP pay a little bit, but then really you're a recruiting company. So the course is almost secondary to the relationships that you build on the recruiting side. I know that now. I didn't know that then. So I would say, what is your product's main function? And that should be where the revenue is coming in and how you build the revenue model around it. So we didn't do that. When I say we, I mean my wife also, because my wife's been a career recruiter. So she worked within the company. We did all right for a little bit. I should have known this ahead of time. I worked at a company. We've talked about it before. I can't say the name. Neither can they say my name. But it was a kind of a tech recruiting type thing. It was a software platform that had to do with recruiting and everything. And I saw that we had AEs that had $1 million targets on the quarter and they were hitting them. And I was like, all right, well, there's money in this. I should consider that. Well, I know a lot about sales. I know a lot about sales training. I know a lot about mindset, and that's where most of my value comes from. In creating the company, that's the value. When people are coming into the company interested, that was the value that they were interested more than anything based on what I had built up. But the revenue was coming from recruiting. And from working at that little recruiting software company, not little, it actually was huge. I learned that you are at the mercy of the market when it comes to recruiting quite a bit. When it's hot, you can make a lot of money. And it was hot at that point. When it's not, you can make nothing. And it almost has nothing to do with your effort. Sure, you could work harder and you could make more, but
Yeah.
I could have worked harder working 100% commission door to door selling office supplies, literally Quill office supplies, business to business. I could have worked harder and made more, still wouldn't have made enough. So market conditions and what you're selling make a difference. And that was probably the largest one, is like, we are a tech sales training company that's making all of its money off of recruiting, when recruiting is really the secondary of what our main value is and what we can do. Great. My wife's a great recruiter, don't get me wrong, like she does it well, but I'm really, really good at sales training, and that's what we should have leaned on. And then when my wife got pregnant with our fifth child, and it was like, all right, well, I'd have to hire somebody to do the recruiting side. This was kind of dependent on that, and I'm not a recruiter. We took a break, not from having kids that we saw to fruition, as we always have, but from building the business and growing the business. My wife is now fully retired, but really doing more work as a stay-at-home mom. And that, I'd say, would be the first lesson is, all right, what do your prospects actually want? What's the largest amount of value that you provide and that you can provide? That's where you should be generating your revenue from. It shouldn't be the secondary to get them in the door. It should be the primary. If it's not the primary, you probably don't have a business. It's probably a half-baked idea, which in reality, V1 of sales org, that's really what it was. It was following the path of stuff that was already out there.
Yeah.
And our model and what made us great and the resources that we had didn't make sense for what we were trying to be.
So would you say, to summarize, you would say you have to understand where the revenue is coming from and what, you can double down on rather than, you're almost lopsided. You were like getting people in the door for one reason, but monetizing for something else. And it wasn't working that way. I see that in freight tech startups a lot, especially VC funded ones where, and this isn't a mistake we have made because we're not VC funded, but I have seen it. Similar theme. They get money raised and they chase product market fit, but they don't actually get to revenue because the thing they're building isn't where they're ended up monetizing the customer at.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make ends meet.
It's funny with VCs and with tech startups, at least, 5 years ago. And it's funny. I don't know if you ever watched Silicon Valley. If not, man, you should really watch it.
I really should. I haven't.
It's literally about tech startups. Like that's what it's about. It's just more on the engineer product side than it is the sales side.
Yeah.
But it's the exact same thing. They even have parts where like they bring in the sales team and everything like that now that they've got something going and they've got the funding. But even in it, characters clearly modeled after Mark Cuban named Russ Hanneman. He says to the main character who came up with the idea for the startup and everything, Richard, Richard's like, well, this model will never be profitable. We'll never get to revenue. And he's like, yeah, that's the goal. You never want to get to revenue because when you get to revenue, that's when expectations are piled on you. When you're pre-revenue, sky's the limit. Your valuation could go anywhere because who knows where it's going to go. The second that you become profitable or that you see revenue is the second that people get an actual idea of what the actual valuation of the company is. And he was saying this shit, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, probably that episode
Yeah, it
came
couldn't
out.
be more
This is
true in
before it hit
2024.
the fan. Like they were wildly prophetic, which I mean, Mike Judge has been in his career entirely, Idiocracy, and I mean, all of the stuff that he's ever made still holds up. But that one in particular was wild because you see that and you see how like these VCs, like it's not the VCs, but it's the folks that work within a VC world, your CROs, your senior vice president of sales and everything. They build the team out. And it's like, yeah, we have SDRs. How do you get your SDRs paid? Well, they get paid on meetings that they book. What if they don't sell? Well, some of them will sell, and that's really the AE's fault. And it's like, yeah, but if an SDR is putting up a bunch of meetings and none of them sell, you don't think that you should maybe look at what kind of meetings they're putting up and maybe raise their base and pay them more in base salary until they can get paid on the deals and only pay them on the ones that actually close. And it's like, no, because the reality is we don't really care. We have aggressive targets to hit, but that we're like I always felt this air at a lot of these startups, and some of them were big billion-dollar startups of like, yeah, we have targets to hit, but like we don't logically do everything in the mode of if this was my money in my pocket that I was spending on a business.
There it is. There it is. Every company that raises money doesn't realize the gravity of like, if you didn't raise the money, what would you do? If you had no money, or if you had to have money to make payroll, what would you do? And I think but I'll share my first lesson. That can go the other way too, right? Because VC and PE companies maybe they chase whatever is making them revenue, not profit, right? Whereas founders that are bootstrapped chase profit over everything because they got to pay payroll. But oftentimes, if you're successful enough, you have all kinds of different opportunities to make money. And you can be easily swayed to say, if I can do one thing and I made money doing that, and this other mentor or business partner has an idea as well to make money, then I could do that. It applies. And I learned it wasn't necessarily learning from mistakes. It was learning from doing it and then realizing that it's not going to work and calling it early, right? But I thought if I could build rocket shipping, then I could build a different business adjacent and it would be similar. right? In the same industry. I was wrong because it was a different monetization and it was floating more money and it was longer pay terms and longer deal cycles, and everything about the unit economics was different except for it was in the same industry. And so my lesson learned was, just because you can run one business and make money and create a cash positive business does not mean you can just say, similar industry, I could do the same thing, rinse and repeat. Because you actually have to look at how long the sales deals take. Is it 6 months instead of 3 weeks? How much are you paying people? How many employees does it take to support one account? How long does it take for that customer to pay you? And so we went up market significantly to like Fortune 100, and it did not pan out. And then I went right back down market to mid market, and it panned out. Different mode, same unit economics. So my lesson was, don't think success begets success in something completely different, and don't relate sister companies to the same business model. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime that you go up market, there's unforeseen challenges. For sure. They can be a different animal. I think what's funny is they can be easier, but you're not going to be able to do the exact same play that you did before. What I mean by easier is it's RVT, right? Talk about in one of the sales org courses, result of activity versus time spent on activity. All right. Well, if this deal is going to net us, say a crazy number, $100 million, but I'm going to have to spend 10 times the amount of time than I would on a deal that would have got us in $1 million. Well, that's a 10x return investment, because it's not 10 million I'm getting 100 million, and I'm only spending 10 times the amount that I would have spent on something that would have netted me one. But it's knowing those numbers, right? I think that's a big thing that people don't look at. They look at deal size only. And it's like, no, there's a formula, and I don't have the perfect one for it. I think it changes by the industry, by what you're selling, but it's a mix of deal size, closing percentage, and deal velocity. And that's what people don't look at. It's like, oh man, we're only getting in these $50 deals. All right, well, if they're all one call closes and it's a 15-minute meeting, and you're taking 10 meetings a day, then you're making 500 a day. You're making 2,500 a week. And if you're holding out for that one deal that you get a month that pays you $5,000, you could have doubled it by doing it the other way. And it's more consistent, and the more consistent close that you get, the more confidence that you get. You're in the flow, you're in the motion. I've done this shit, this exact thing. I was taking 60, 70 meetings, and I was closing sometimes 3 or 4 in a day, and I couldn't be stopped. Not because I was great, but I sure thought I was, because I kept closing so much that my confidence was at an all-time high. The motion was at an all-time high. SDRs could send me something, and it could be kind of trash, like halfway trash, and be like, it doesn't matter. They talk to me, they buy. Let's go. So there's something to that when it goes to going up market. Like there's more than just, all right, cool, let's look at deal size. All right, well, what's the deal velocity? What's the closing percentage? What could change differently? I think the big thing is talking to them almost without the goal of selling them, and just for research purposes of like, and that does get your foot in the door, but like going to those larger ones, or if you know someone that works at a larger one, and saying, hey, like, we're considering going up market and just leveraging difference. I don't even know whether or not we'd be a good solution for you guys. And candidly, I don't even know how to go about selling you. But I'd be curious if you'd be willing to give me like 30 minutes, really exploratory. I might not even have anything to sell you. And just start asking questions and start to get an idea, because that's the issue with going up market, is that you have it's a way smaller pool for you to fish in, way smaller pond. There's not as many fish in there, and
there's a lot more.
I don't want to waste one. Yeah.
There's a lot of fishermen for fewer fish too. To pull out a point that you made, one, I have to preface this for the audience, if you guys are out there listening to this. The mistakes that I made about shiny object syndrome and saying I could do it in both ways, that was before I had Troy Barter. So come on. I mean, now I can do it all because I got Troy Barter with me. But I thought I could sell both models, and I thought I could do both. And it was more a result of stretching myself thin and saying I can run 2 companies because they're similar. They weren't. They just looked similar, right? Now, if you're talking just sales pipeline, if I would have known what I know now, which is what Barter has put into my brain, deal velocity was what killed us. And I mean, it's not dead. It's still a good company. I pivoted, but deal velocity is what the entire formula. If I had just had that, I wouldn't have made that mistake. I would have done it maybe up market a bit, but I would have done a little bit of research on like how long does each deal take, how much cash flow do I need, and what would be considered a success. So my second lesson learned is probably the one that I'm still working on the most, which is projections, expectations, and figuring out where you need to be next. If you don't have all of the math or sales math right, and you think, hey, we can grow from X to Z, and you skip Y because your expectation is Z, you feel like it failed. But if you would have had the expectation of Y and you created predictable, repeatable revenue instead of trying to always be in hyper growth, you'd have been a lot healthier org, right? And I do think we have a healthy org, but 2023 was a bad year, relatively speaking, because in my business in Rocket, 2021 to 2022, anybody with a phone and an internet connection could make money in freight. However, 2023, things started to turn and it was a lot harder to make money in freight. We actually grew 25% from 2022 to 2023 and then to 24. But we had grown 100%. So I thought we missed, right? But if I'd have known the macroeconomics, 25% growth, right now, the top 3 brokerages all had at least 15% revenue decline year over year. They just released Q1. Everybody's taking a bath and we're still growing. So it's all about how do you not just set the right expectations. So if I got it wrong in my head and then I communicate that to the team feels like we didn't hit the target or we didn't hit our growth goal, but I didn't set it correctly because I didn't think of things we couldn't control and say, hey, I need to bake that in. So it's not something you can actually learn. It's just something to be more cogent of in the future is like, hey, I should have growth goals, but I have to be able to stake them against something that maybe things change. And that hurts morale, which hurts culture, which hurts everything. So you want to be careful about how you set that.
That's a typical thing, by the way. Like missetting the target. I mean, it happened at Fleetmatics where, I used to tell people all the time in my like interview processes, or if people ask me, I'd be like, I had my best year there as a manager. I had more people go to sales conference than any other team. Number 1 account executive in the entire company globally, number 1 SDR, rookie of the year, came from our team. And I just lost director of the year in terms of quota attainment the last day of the year. And the team that I lost to actually wasn't a team. One manager left of one team, and they took another manager and put their teams together. So they had one, and then they caught up and they beat me the last day of the year. I hit target as a team 1 month out of that year, just one. That
Yeah,
was
I
it.
think you mentioned that
Because
before.
everyone didn't hit their target. The targets were too high. They completely misread the growth that they could have, because at Fleetmatics, you'd go to sales conference and it looked like a hockey stick growth every year. There'd be somebody standing at a really cool stage, real expensive hotel event center, and this massive 20-foot screen, and it would be a hockey stick that went straight up in terms of what we did. Hey, our goal was this year. Everyone thought we were nuts, and we grew by even more than that. And then at some point, it's physically impossible to do that every year. There's no company in the history of companies that does that year in and year out, every year, forever. That level of growth can't possibly happen. It just can't. There's not enough leads. There's not enough territory that you can sell the particular product to. So you run out at some point and things slow down. And it did that year. And that's just like they misread. They just assumed we could just keep on going with what we were doing. And as a publicly traded company, you owe it to the shareholders to show the growth and everything like that and all that good stuff. And that's where it took us to. So I tell people that, like, it's not about whether or not you crush your target, of whether or not you stay somewhere. It's like when, if you and your boy are being chased by a bear, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun your boy. That's all you need to do. Like, and that, like, so whenever I go over those numbers, like, they look great until it's like, well, how many times do you hit target on the year? Well, one time we hit target,
So
which was like incredible because no one hit. Yep.
Yeah. Well, so to pull on that thread, this isn't a lesson learned for a mistake. I think if like it goes with the theme of missetting target and like changing economic environments, but also like eventually you can't have hockey stick growth forever.
Yep.
I think that one of the things I've done really well and that I'm doubling down on is pivot faster than anybody else. And so, a lot of people will say out loud, but not actually practice, well, when I get new information, I change my mind. And I think most entrepreneurs are probably the most stubborn of the group of changing their mind because it has to do with pride. And if you have a whole team and you tell them this is what we're doing and you work so hard to get them to buy into the change, you almost don't pivot for fear of being wrong in front of them and having to eat crow. And I have always pivoted faster than everybody around me would like. But after 4 years now, everybody that works here is used to that. And instead of having to say, hey, we're going to change one small thing and having an entire company meeting and department meetings and saying, here's what we're going to change, I've been able to not by design, but because I always pivoted, everybody who works at Rocket now is open to the pivots. And the people who don't work here we're not open to them. But it has really worked out well in year 4, where if I want to change something at all, I can implement it in a week and the whole company can adapt to it. And it was because that's all we did from the beginning. So the idea is to avoid corporate bloat of like, oh, we have to get a board to approve this and then a committee to discuss it and then implementation over the next year. We can do that in a week, and that's why we're winning. We can beat our competitors. Anytime there's new information in the market, we can pivot quicker.
So if you are a founder and any founder at a startup is going to have to pivot 1,000 times. That's just facts. No one's got the perfect plan that stays that way the whole time. So you're looking to hire people that are able to adopt that. There is a formula for that, right? So Tamara Lowe wrote a book called Get Motivated, and it goes over how to calculate your individual motivational DNA. And part of it, they ask questions to determine whether you're a variable or a stabilizer. I haven't read this book in 15 years, but I'm pretty sure that's the one that it was. So it's questions like, are you comfortable with the room being messy for a little bit, or does it have to be cleaned right away and it has to stay clean? Or are you comfortable with, like, you can live with it if you had to, right? Or if you had to move really fast, would you be excited about it, or would you be like absolutely like losing your mind, pulling your hair out, like anxious about it? And the variables are the ones that are like, maybe they can kind of live with it messy. Maybe they don't prefer it to be, but they could live with it for a little bit if they had to. And maybe they know that they kind of sometimes can have a habit of it being a little bit messy, but that's okay. No big deal. Things get messy sometimes. The big one is like, I resonated with was like, I was always a mover in sales. So when we're going door to door, they're like, hey, you want to run offices in New York City? I was like, yeah, when am I leaving? I'll go right now. No problem. We'll figure out a way to break the lease. Let's go. I liked the change. And that helped really well when I got into tech startups, because you work at a place for 5 years. It feels like you worked at 10 different places, but you were at one place the whole time. So the more that you're a variable, it's not a guarantee, but a way higher likelihood that change excites you. And if change doesn't excite you, you're less likely to adopt the change quickly. If you're less likely to adopt the change quickly, it's going to be very tough for you to work at a startup, because the only guarantee is that everything's going to change. That's the only constant, is the change. So
yeah,
you kind of have to. So that's the type of stuff that you want to look for, and the questions that you want to ask in the interview process, not just with your sales team, with everyone, because everyone's going to have to pivot at some point.
Operations, customer success, sales, finance. Dude, for the record, if you're listening to this, pause it and write that down. I'm putting that in my next interview. I interview 5 people tomorrow, and I'm asking all of them that question, or those series of questions. Maybe not going to pepper them with it. I'm going to find a way to like work them in so it's not quite obvious what I'm aiming for. But man, that I just said that was a lesson learned because I didn't make the mistake, but really I willed my way through the changes in the adapting. And now after 4 years, my favorite line is, I haven't failed us yet. So now I've earned a lot of trust from the team, where if I make a decision, they go, I don't know what he's doing, but I will go ahead and listen and follow, even though, sometimes it's disagree and commit. Either way, I get a lot of leadway. When I first started, I got a lot of leadway because I was paying everybody and this was their job. In the middle, the org got bigger. I got less leadway. I had more leaders, I had more employees, and I had more skepticism around me all the time. And I finally steered that back to, I have a lot of leadway again. But it was a mistake. I didn't look for, I have hired 10 people that I have now fired, right? So I've hired 40 people. We have 30 left. And that's a probably healthy thing to hire and fire.
Yep.
Because I make decisions a lot quicker now. But those 10 people, if I would have asked them those questions, 8 of them wouldn't have ever been hired because they did not like change and they wanted things to be routine, and change was bad, and changing your mind was a sign of failure to them. And so I could have probably saved some heartache there, or I guess headache, either way, probably both.
I think at least how I look at it. So I would assume that a lot of other people look at it the same way, whether they know they are or not, is I judge a company's recruiting ability not by like how many people end up leaving or get let go, but how many of their A players they lose. So, I bring up Fleetmatics a lot. They never lost one. I can't point to an A player that ever left on the sales team ever. Even years after Verizon acquired them, it took a while for some people to leave. And now finally, over the past few years, people have started to leave. But Verizon acquired the company almost 10 years ago now. It was in 2016. It's just crazy. But I've seen at other places where like an A player, they're crushing it. They're well over target, and then they leave. And it's like, well, why'd they leave? Well, they get offered more money somewhere else. Well, why didn't they get offered more money here? If they're an A player, they're overproducing. They're doing what 2 people could do, but we're not paying them what 2 people would get paid. And if you paid that one person what 2 people get paid, you save money because you have to run a risk of the hiring to get another A player, which you're probably not going to get. You're only paying for their insurance once. You're only paying for certain parts of their salary and payroll taxes once. There's a lot of different things that will save you money off that.
My goodness.
Doubles, and they're a safe bet. But we had a CRO at the place that I'm talking about. I won't say which one. It's kind of obvious if you look at my resume, and I said it's not Fleetmatics. And they had gotten like ripped apart so bad in a negotiation of comp with one rep who's still my boy to this day. Love the guy. And they were like literally butthurt from how bad they got wrecked in that one negotiation. So then they felt like every negotiation after that, they had to win because like they were sore about the fact that they lost. So who did we almost lose because of that? We almost lost an 18-year-old Jed Marley because of that, right? So anyone like Jed Marley has now 20,000 people following him on just his newsletter, 50 to 60,000 on LinkedIn. I got a cold FaceTime from Will Aitken the other day, and it was like him stacked up with another 10 or 15 well-known influencers in Brooklyn for a Sell Better event that Jed was at, where they all got flown out and everything. We almost let this guy go off of like almost nothing on a negotiation so the CRO could feel like they won. And I made a post about it. I didn't say, but they knew. They got mad that I made a post about it. And it's like, Carly Simon, dude, you're so vain. You probably thought that post was about you. And it was about you also that time.
Yeah.
A lot of times people think I make posts about them. I didn't. That time I did, which is the goal of the negotiation isn't for you to feel like you won the negotiation. It's to feel like you won on your headcount strategy for the rest of the year. So if you acquired somebody and it might have cost a little bit more money, but you're going to get a return from them, your alternative is to lose them and have to replace them. But on the flip side of that also, now you get to compete against them if they go to a competitor. So you went from somebody being your ally who was going to help build that business out to potentially losing them, and their most attractive their most attractive skill set is what they did here. So who do you think wants that?
And who do you think they'll do it against first? Because of like human nature, they're competitive, so they're going to immediately say you missed out, and they have something to prove. I mean, I was an A player that left a company because of many reasons, but like if they'd have kept me, I would be doing really well as an individual contributor, and I would have 3 houses, and that would have been like the pinnacle, and that wasn't what I was chasing. It was never about that. And they didn't understand it. And so the same situation, I don't name names, I can't. They lost the comp plan battle against me, but it was on accident. I didn't negotiate it. I was 22 when I started. I had no idea what I was doing. I took a commission-only deal that when it proved out, there was these tiers that you could unlock if you did X amount of business. Well, I did that way faster than they thought, and they never thought I would get to the top tier, and I did it in the first year and a half, and they're like, we're upside down already. And so they continually came back to me and said, we need you to take a pay cut, even though you're our top seller. You need to take a cut. And I was like, I'm getting more. You make more than me, and I keep getting more business. This doesn't make sense. And that's what was the leading indicator of me exiting. But what I wanted to point out is that A players might leave, but people follow the A players. So you might lose half a sales team, or you might lose SDRs that were promising. You might lose operations. You might lose more than just the A player. So you got to be very smart about that.
I just realized that we did the same thing. So when I was going door to door, that happened. I worked for Sidcore, which is, I mean, it's a glorified pyramid scheme. It is. It's a fact.
Yeah.
I can't be sued because they would be revealing facts, that's what it is. And we were making almost nothing. And their sister company 2020 paid double because they didn't have the same model. It wasn't a pyramid scheme model. It was more of like a business model where it's like, sure, our managers make pretty good money, but the reps make way better money than they would anywhere else because we shouldn't funnel it all to the top when they're the ones actually out there beating the block up every day. And I told my boss, I still love her, by the way. Like I still think she's the shit. She helped me a lot in a lot of things, but I told her, I was like, don't worry, I'm not going to take anybody. And she said, you can go ahead and try. She should have never said that, dude. That was a massive mistake because I took about half of her team. I took so many people from Sidcore that I think Gary Paulson, I want to say, or one of the like C-suite founders sent a letter, like a certified letter to the CEO, if I'm not mistaken, or the founder of 2020 to say, dude, we're sister companies. We're suing you if Troy takes another person from us. Like, and she told me to go ahead and try. And I was like, all right, cool. That's not going to be hard. They paid double and people like working with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
Because you're an A player. And like, you can judge an organization by how many A players stay. And like for open sourcing, rocket shipping, we've never lost an A player. We're only 4 years in, but I plan to never lose A players. And the reason that I think we've had success with that, lesson learned, double down on it, is because I was an A player that left and you were an A player that left. And so like we view it through that lens. And I think that will continue to be a successful path for us. Now, we always have things that I always have things I'm blind to because of that mentality as well. But because I just think that, competitive greatness is if you work at Rocket, everybody has to be competitively great. I am learning there's nuance to that. Like you have to be able to have people that just want to show up and then clock out and that's their job. And then they go home and they don't think about work. You can't have a successful scaling org without those people as well. And they need to feel like this is a great workplace for them. So it's not a sales floor at all times. And so that's something I'm learning. But all right, Troy, let's wrap it up. Give me one more lesson learned or thing you want to double down on and make it about this year with Sales Org or Rocket.
So lesson learned this year is really know your ICP and why you want them to be your ICP. I'd say is like the large one, right? Because in reality, like I said earlier, what was the big value at Sales Org was really my training. People that followed me and liked how I did a little trainings online would come in because they would get more training from me and in a course format. So what ICP did I go after? Well, I have tens of thousands of followers that are already at blue chip companies like Slack, Salesforce, Amazon, Oracle, like you name them, big companies. I've got a lot of people that follow me at them. So did I go after them? Who, by the way, I'm a great trainer and I've got things that they like. They follow me. They're in my lives all the time.
You are a great trainer. I can attest, seen it in action.
So was that my addressable market that I went after, which they have a budget, they have money on their own, plus their company will pay for training. They have a learning and development budget already. Was that my ICP? No, I went after the brokest part of my audience. And that is not to negate them. It's just because they're earlier in their career. But when you're talking about breaking into tech sales and you're training people on breaking into tech sales, they want to get into tech sales so they can make the money someday that the other half of my audience already makes. So I decided to go after the ones with the less money to start with. It made absolutely no sense in terms of like, all right, well, like, why are they my ICP? Well, probably because they're the most vocal. They're the most pumped about it. They're excited about changing their life and everything. And I get a lot of messages from them. But now those messages are coming in from people that were those people 2 years ago. And now they're absolutely crushing it at a giant company. And it's like, man, Had I had that as my ICP the whole time when they really already were, and created a product and training that went to them, we would be massive compared to where we are right now. So like, it's a matter of, when it comes to your ICP, why is it your ICP? Why are you going after them as your ICP? And is there a better one or a larger one that you could be going after with a relatively similar offering that you have right now that would generate a much larger return long term? That was
Long
probably
term,
the largest
long
lesson.
term. There it is. It's a long term play too. So to summarize, one quote that I don't know who said it, I've heard it before, so it's not my quote, but I like to repeat it, is that people do, contrary to popular belief, people do not fear failure. They just fear failing publicly or in front of their family and peers. And it's really the fear of someone thinks that I failed and they'll judge me for that. And the crazy part of the whole psychology is that 98% of humans see other people fail and they have empathy rather than judgment. And we don't realize it. And so if you're looking, at a mistake like Troy, you just said you made a mistake by going to the wrong market. And it's just so fun to do episodes like this because like most people are not building publicly, and it's because of fear of failure publicly. But it's so fun to be like, man, how did I not see that? And like, we're really doing a I would call a bang up job of growing rocket shipping. We're going to the moon, as we like to call it, and we still make mistakes all the time that are small little mistakes just like that. And then we look back, we go, oh my goodness, how did we not know? How did we not see it? And so hopefully this episode encourages you guys to talk to others around you about what things they're failing at. Because as I started this, and look at the full circle ending I'm giving here, man, this is great podcasting, guys. Full circle would be, as I started it, if you have I just blanked. But don't worry, guys, cut this out. What was I talking about in the beginning of the episode? I don't know where I was going there. Someone texted me while
It's
I was
about talking about failure publicly.
Yeah, and then we started the episode out. Ladies, help me out here. Oh, never mind. They weren't paying attention.
Well, I can do it. Listen, like if you're
yeah, we got to
building something out, the more that you communicate your failures and your successes with other people that you trust and that maybe have been in your shoes previously or are right now,
yes,
the better the solution is going to be that you come up with. Whether it's something that you learned that is going well, that somebody might actually be able to help you double down on or even refine that, or things that you failed at that chances are a million other people already have. But if you keep that to yourself, then you now are going out there hoping to find the answer that's tailored to you when it already exists if you would just communicate it more. And I'm a fan of the Yeezy method, which is, talk shit and then have to live up to it. Grant Cardone says overpromise and overdeliver. I don't like that one, but I do like saying I'm gonna do this and it be something big and I really mean it. But it's like, now I have to, because if I don't, everyone knows that I didn't. And to me, that's I think a good way of going about doing it. And if you fail, screw it. Be honest about failing and then pivot. Like you have unlimited free tries. There's no game over in business. You get to keep going. Like
there it is. There it is. And business is a game. And if you have the foresight to realize, and like I said in the beginning of the episode, a lot of people think that you have to learn through failure. That does not make it exclusive to learn through your own failure. So if we had more people building publicly that didn't fear public failure, then more people would learn from the mistakes that the others around them are making. So if our episode does anything to help that, that would be awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in to yet another episode of Rocket Revenue. We're still doing this. We're going to do it every week, and we're going to open source building a predictable and repeatable revenue model. Signing off. That's what it was I was talking about. It was the